For all of the buttons on our home page, we're going to use graphic elements, but a very special kind of a graphic, an SVG graphic, and that stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. And a vector graphic is a mathematical formula that controls the look of the graphic. The result is the graphic is always much smaller in file size, and it can be rescalable or scalable. You can resize it to any dimensions you want without distorting the image. Because of that, we're only going to need to create one SVG graphic for all of our buttons, no matter what size they are. Now, to create that, all you need is a knowledge of XML programming language. You can actually create a vector graphic using a simple text editor. Fortunately for us, there are also online SVG editors. So that's what we're going to do right now. We'll move to Google, and if you simply type in SVG-edit, you'll see all different sorts of SVG editors. The one I like is part of googlecode.com, and we'll open that up right now. It's a very, very simple program. Looks a lot like any simple graphic tool. First thing we'll do is set the stroke size, and I'll adjust that. I'll make it 2 pixels. I'll set the stroke color, and I'm going to use a hexadecimal number that I've been using quite a bit in this project. And by the way, that's an excellent reason to always make notes and write down somewhere what are the hexadecimal definitions of colors that you're using in a project. So now I have the stroke color. Next I'll come up with a fill color, and for right now any color will kind of do, because we will be able to change that color once we load it into Dreamweaver. Okay, I'm going to click the rectangle tool, and I'll use the very first choice, and I simply drag a rectangle. Now I've created this little shape, but now I can modify it a little bit. For an example, for the width, I want it to be our measurements for right now. I might as well use that as a starting point. 135 pixels wide and 45 pixels high. I want a rounded corner on this rectangle, so I will move it up to about 10 pixels, and you can see where I'm going. And then for the location of it, I want it to be horizontally at the very left, so I'll put in an X coordinate of 0, and I want it to be at the very top, so I'll put in a Y coordinate of 0, and there I am. I have a completed graphic. Now, if you'll click on this Edit Source tab or button, this is the code that has been generated. Now, we're going to have to modify this a little bit, but our first step right now is to simply copy this and paste it into Dreamweaver. Right now, you're looking at the copied code from the SVG editor, and all I did was paste it into a text editor, Notepad in this case. You might, just to be safe, you might actually take and save this and save it into your project. You might want to save it into your project support folder for easy reference. And that's what I'm going to do. I'll put it into support, and I'll call it button SVG, and it's a text file. Okay, so I haven't lost that at any particular point. Now, before I go any further, let's take a look at our web page right here. I'm going to link all of these images real quickly, and the way to link it without actually linking it to a real page is just make the link a pound sign. So I'll do that for all of these placeholder images up at the top. Not too hard to do. Okay, next I'll actually get rid of that image, but first I'll go to source code. And by the way, when you get into more advanced aspects of web design, there is no way you can get away from looking at source code and modifying source code directly. All right, here's the first image placeholder. I'm going to add a little bit of white space here so that I can see it real easily. and you can see that it is linked right here. Now I'll highlight the entire placeholder image and Control V to paste in my SVG graphic. Now I'm going to modify this code a little bit. First of all, for the title, I'm going to call it Button 1. And for the width, instead of 45 pixels, I'm going to make it 100%. So it's always as high as it can possibly go inside of the division. I'll make the width 100%. And I'm in pretty good shape. The next thing we'll do is I like to make these elements as simple as possible. So I create I modify a tag definition with CSS styles. Here's all of our CSS styles. I'll create something new. It'll be a tag, and the tag name is rectangle. Okay, now I'll leave it all blank. And one thing that I like to do is to take the source code for the SVG graphic and move a lot of it to CSS. So where it says height and width, I have to leave that. RY and RX, I have to leave all of that. But where it says stroke and stroke width and fill color, I can actually move those elements to the CSS definition. I do that to make it a little cleaner. So Control X, I'm going to cut that right out. And now inside the rectangle definitions, I'll paste it in. I'm going to have to modify it just a little bit the way it looks to typical CSS code. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm simply moving the definitions into the CSS section. Is this absolutely necessary? No, but it helps us work a little cleaner. It's going to make our code look that much cleaner when we're done. So I do think it's worth it to do that. Okay, very, very good. Now we'll come back to the actual SVG graphics. And by the way, the code for the SVG is in yellow. We're going to make a couple of modifications. First of all, for the ID, I don't want to call it SVG underscore. I'll simply call it SVG1 to make it a little bit easier. And right here you see an additional tag. And this is very, very important. And here it has width as well as over here we have width. So it has width in two different places, and they have to match. Now, I have found through experience that the width and height definition that appears right inside the SVG opening tag is you need this to match in order to work with Firefox. So I'll make this 100%, and I'll make this one 100%. Okay, now the G simply groups various parts or definitions of the SVG together. So G stands for group, doesn't hurt anything. Okay, so we're really good to go here. The next thing that I need to do, I'll simply highlight this code now that I've got it all fixed, and I might straighten it out a little bit here. I'll highlight all of this code, Control C to copy it. And now where the next button is, I'll add a little bit of white space right after the link. And by the way, you can actually make the link in XML right inside the SVG graphic if you want to. But I think this works just as easily. It's a little simpler for people who are just getting started here. I'm going to eliminate the placeholder image and paste in my modified code. Terrific. The only thing I have to do is change the ID. I'm going to call it SVG2. And I'll repeat this process with all 4 or 5 buttons. I've copied the XML code for the SVG button, and I've copied it and placed it in appropriate divisions on the page. One thing I should point out is for every time I pasted in this XML code, I changed the title to match the button. I also changed the ID appropriately. You never want to use the same ID twice. You'll generate problems. One additional thing that I did, I replaced the code in this particular division, the words in this particular division, with an SVG graphic. And if you'll look a little further down, you'll see that. And that comes down right in here. You'll see button 6. And it's the same exact code. Now I save the page and it won't show up. These buttons will not show up in Dreamweaver, but they will show up on any browser, in any modern browser. And that's one other point I should mention. SVG graphics will not work on very, very old browsers. But today, in the year 2013, 2014, just about everybody has a modern browser. So we're well on our way with this project. We're ready to tackle the next step.